Hey everyone, Mrs. Slauson. Just wanted to touch base with you. Um, in the adding and subtracting of the rational functions chapter, you are going to be asked to find the least common denominator. And some people are really great at this and some people struggle. So I just wanted to show you a little trick that Miss Roseline might not mention in her notes. So just a heads up, again, I am at home and you might hear some barking dogs, but I don't know, we'll find out. So anyway, there's one. So what you typically do is, when you're adding or subtracting fractions and you need that least common denominator, you compare your denominators and then you multiply each denominator by what it needs. So like in this top fraction up here, I would need to multiply the first one by 5 and the second one by 3 because my least common denominator is 15. On the second one, with my least common denominator, which is 14, I would only have to multiply this first fraction by 2 and I could get there. So how does something like that work with a little bit more detail? Well, the idea of what we're going to be doing, the reason why we want you to factor is because we're going for the least common denominator. So if we kind of just compare, taking these two up here, and let's say the denominators were 8 and 24, what we're doing is we're breaking this 8 down until it's factored all the way, completely factored. So I'm going to make a little factor tree, break this down, and I can't break it down anymore. But what I notice is that 8, when it's broken down and factored completely, is 2 times 2 times 2. Those are the 3 factors that make up 8. And then when I take 24, okay, that the factors of 24 broken down completely are 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So what I would want to do then is compare, 8 and 24 and notice that 24 has a 3, and so the 8 needs a 3 as well. And now they both have the same factors. They both have 3 2's, and then they both have a 3. So when you take these and you're going to break them down, you're going to factor them all the way. So I'm not going to go over the factoring part, but this one's factors x plus 3 and x minus 1. And this one is x minus 4 and x plus 3. What I like to do is I call it the factor table. And I take my first fraction's denominator. So f1 is fraction 1. And we're imagining that these are the denominators. And I just put each factor in a column. So x plus 3 gets a column and x minus 1 gets a column. And then I take the other fraction. So again, this was fraction 1. Let's say this is fraction 2's denominator. And I put the same factor in the same column. So the second one has an x plus 3, so it will join this one. But with the x minus 4, it gets to start its own column. And then what I do is I look for the least common denominator and I bring all the factors down. And what I need to make sure is that each denominator, again, saying that this is a denominator and this is a denominator, has all 3 parts. So when I look at the first one, this has the x plus 3, it has the x minus 1, but it doesn't have the x minus 4. So I would have to get x minus 4 here. And when I compare the other one, it has, let's see, the x minus 4, the x plus 3, but it doesn't have the x minus 1, so I would put it here. So this whole fraction table just kind of gives me an idea of what I need for both denominators to have. So let's try one more. Imagine that these are the denominators. Here's the denominator of our first fraction. Here's the denominator of our second fraction. I'm going to break them down into their factors. Here's the other one. And again, some of you will realize, what this one needs and what this one needs so that they're both the same. Again, what I mean by what it needs is the fact that this needed a 5 and this needed a 3 so that we could get our least common denominator of 15. So what again I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first fraction's denominator and each factor gets a column. So x plus 6 and x minus 5. I don't need to put them in parentheses. These columns are kind of their own parentheses. And then I'm going to take the other fraction, and x minus 9 doesn't fit here and it doesn't fit here, so it's going to get its own column. And then I'll put the x minus 5 with the other x minus 5. And then I'm going to bring everything down, and I will be able to see what the least common denominator is. And so when I look at this first fraction, it has the x plus 6. Sorry about that. Set an alarm because I have to do some online meetings here in just a moment. So anyway, as I was saying, it has an x plus 6 and an x plus 6. It has an x minus 5 and an x minus 5, but what it doesn't have is the x minus 9. So I would want to take this first fraction and multiply both the bottom and the top by x minus 9. And then when I look at my other one, it has an x minus 9. So here has an x minus 5 here, but what it doesn't have is the x plus 6. So I would want to multiply this fraction, the top and the bottom, by x plus 6. So maybe that helps if you're struggling with the least common denominator. Again, factor your denominators completely and try this little factor table. Okay, that's it.